9 o'clock. I'd like to go ahead and call the Lane County Board of Commissioners meeting to order for this Tuesday, November 8th, Election Day. We'll start off with adjustments to the agenda. I would note that we do have an emergency business item. Is there anything else? No. Nothing? Okay. How about item 2, public comments? Do we have anybody signed up? Okay. Item 3 is, let's go with Commissioner's remonstrance or other issues this morning. Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to say happy Election Day to all those who are voting and all those who are going to be affected by those who have voted. And just think it's an opportunity for us at the county level to point out that, you know, the elections aren't decided by whim. They're not decided by any one person. They're not decided by government. They're decided by the people who vote and by the people who count the votes. And the people that count the votes work for Lane County government. And they are working very hard and have been working hard to get ready for this big every 4-year election. It's the biggest election, certainly in our community, every 4 years. And it's a huge amount of work. And for those who are concerned about the accuracy or fairness of the collection, ballot collection process, counting process, our public affairs folks have done a nice video on the topic, and you can learn all about how it's handled. One of the things I learned, I think it was 2 years ago when I watched the election process, is that every ballot, once it's been opened, is handled by 2 people, and they have to be of opposite political parties. So, you know, 2 Democrats can't handle 1 ballot. It has to be a Democrat and an independent, or a Democrat and a Republican. Similarly, it cannot be 2 Republicans handling a ballot. And so that ensures a bit of fairness in the process. Also, you can be an election observer. If a campaign appoints you to be an election observer, you can become an election observer. So we've had election observers from city council campaigns, county commissioner campaigns, state representative campaigns. So if you want to be an observer, you can become a volunteer observer.
Thank you, Pete. Great information. I would note that Commissioner Bozovich texted me and said he's running about 5 minutes late, so he's in transit. Others this morning? Okay. Then let's move to item 4, which is the emergency business. And it is action to approve correspondence to Governor Kate Brown on the 2017-2019 budget priorities. I'd like to welcome Alex Kyler, our Intergovernmental Relations Manager, this morning. Good morning. Okay, he's handing out a new letter as there was a typo that was pointed out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Alex Kyler, Intergovernmental Relations Manager, before you today with a letter to Governor Brown. This came to us from a request, via request from the U of O to pen a letter asking for her budget to include expanded bonding capacity for capital construction needs at the public universities in Oregon. And I think in particular, they are very excited by the recent gift from Phil and Penny Knight to improve the research capabilities at the University of Oregon. But clearly they're aware of several other requests that are other capital improvements that are being looked at around the state, including a fairly sizable improvement in the city of Bend by Oregon State University would also be included in this. I did note and was just reviewing, there's a letter from 18 members of the Oregon legislature to her that's very similar to this one, seeking the same kind of consideration for an expanded capital construction budget for the public universities.
Okay. Questions for Alex? Welcome, Commissioner Bozovich. We're on the emergency item, in case you want to figure that out. Thanks. Okay.
I got it.
Oh. we're up. So Commissioner Farr then?
Ready for a motion? I move approval of the correspondence to Governor Kate Brown as provided in the letter before us, with the allowance for any small Scrivener or typographical changes that may need to be made that don't alter the substance.
Okay.
Second.
You have a second? I would just state, I want to thank you, Mr. Kyler, for your getting this prepared and ready for us today. I would note that we did make a recommendation or a request to the governor's office in regards to a policy option package. I think it was about a month ago, and I did receive a letter. Hopefully I forwarded it to everybody, thanking us for our input and encouraging us to continue to do that. So they welcomed the support letter or request from us, and so just want to say that they are reading these, and it's important that we send them. So any other comments? Okay, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
And no opposed, it passes unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 5 is employee recognition. Sorry, Mr. Mokrajewski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I want to invite Chris Mausch and Don Wedmore up here to come sit with me. And really pleased, and then I'm going to have Herman Thomas and Matt Dapkus in a minute join us at the table. We're really pleased to recognize Chris and Don here today. I think, you know, we all come in on Monday morning to this facility and our Lane County facilities downtown, and we see this beautiful and pristine grounds around us. And if you hadn't been here over the weekend, you wouldn't know what these gentlemen deal with early on Monday morning. They show up early before all of our employees get here, and they do just a fantastic job of preparing the grounds for all of our employees to come and work here, and for all of the members of the public who come and engage with our services throughout the week. Chris and Don are landscape technicians in Public Works, and they work in our county facilities as landscape technicians. They are the reasons that our staff and community receive a welcoming feeling when they come to our facilities. They do a great job of keeping the landscaping watered, trimmed, and cared for on a regular basis. They routinely clean, pressure wash, pick up litter, and protect the open spaces around our facilities. Above and beyond that, though, they have, I think, challenges in their jobs that in many other cases, folks in similar situations wouldn't have to deal with. Chris and Don go far and above the typical daily routine by cleaning not only litter on the grounds, but also food, cigarette butts, drug paraphernalia, syringes, clothing, graffiti, and more. Some things I'm not going to mention for the family audience that might be watching, but really challenging situations that these two individuals put themselves in on a regular basis, because not just because it's part of their job, but they care, I know this deeply, about keeping our grounds clean, and they take their jobs really seriously. Monday mornings are especially bad due to the extra litter and waste that's accumulated over the weekend. When groups of people gather together over the weekend, we have some great events that take place, Saturday Market in particular, downtown, and large crowds of people come together. It does create challenges in the Free Speech Plaza as a result of the booze and activity in Saturday Market. There's a lot of activity that gets pushed into the Free Speech Plaza, and it's not uncommon, I know, for Chris to drive by over the weekend so that he can get a sense of what he'll be walking into on Monday morning. And both Chris and Don work hard to take care of the garbage and all the unsightly surprises before others arrive at the building. So, and I have had the occasion often on weekends and Saturday or Sunday, I'll drive by and we'll see the mess that is left out in front of our facility. But most employees, when they show up on Monday morning, if you hadn't come down on the weekend, you wouldn't know what went into making our grounds really just outstanding. And what I appreciate is it's a sign of the respect that we have for the work that we do and the people that we serve, that we make sure that the facilities that our employees and the public come to demonstrates that respect for people and for the services that we provide. Chris and Don are also giving managers tours on Monday morning so that everyone can better understand the challenges that we face each week. And I'd encourage commissioners, if you're available and interested, to take a tour early on a Monday morning to see some of the things. And we provided a handout for you with some pictures in it that are real things that we've had to deal with here that are real challenges on the grounds. I want to invite Herman Thomas and Matt Dapkus to come up here as well. We can bring another chair up so both of you can come sit up here and talk a little bit about how this has been really a team approach. And I think our folks have done, Tim Elsey, our Public Works Director, is here. Judy Williams, our Interim Assistant Public Works Director. And I will say Judy's done just a fantastic job of working along with Betty Michaud and Michael Johns, who are also here in this team, and working with our partners at the city, with the Eugene Police Department, in trying to identify solutions that allow people access to these public grounds and facilities over the weekend for some positive community events, but also ensure that our grounds are respected and our employees are kept safe. So I want to just for a moment touch on the work that Matt and Herman do to support Chris and Don. They do an excellent job, Matt and Herman do, of giving the tools necessary for Chris and Don to do their work. I should say that Matt Dapkus is our maintenance supervisor in Public Works, and Herman Thomas is our custodial supervisor in Public Works. They do a great job, as any outstanding supervisor does, in advocating for additional resources for their employees to combat the biggest challenges that they face. Matt and Herman have taken extra steps to secure the gates and post acceptable use hours alongside no trespassing signs that have been approved by the City of Eugene. Matt and Herman are also working actively with the Capital Projects Manager to design and plan for gates and other improvements to discourage overnight use on the grounds. And Matt and Herman are often acting as co-supervisors and work to support Chris and Don each week, especially as they face these really challenging situations with some individuals in the downtown areas. I should say it occurs most significantly at the Public Services Building, but also at our elections office and other downtown facilities that we have. So this truly is a team effort that these individuals have made, and we've dealt a lot. I really enjoy interacting with all of these folks on a regular basis, and they're individuals that you get to see their work. You get to see them working every day and what they're doing. They always have smiles on their face. They don't complain about the work that they have to do or the challenges that they face. They are concerned about it, and they want us to know, and so they'll tell me and they'll tell others, you know, these are real things that we have to face. We need some help on this, and we're trying to do everything we can to tackle those issues, but that doesn't stop them from doing a great job every day. And I want to express my thanks and our organization's thanks for the great work that you all do. And we have certificates here for you. And I just wanted to, again, thank the board for the opportunity to recognize the great employees we have here doing great work.
Comments? Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think one of the things that needs to be mentioned about all four, and the thing I really appreciate, and before I start in that, one of my first jobs working for my dad, when building houses, he said, before you learn to pick up a saw or put a belt around you, here's a can, and you get to go pick up all the bent nails, and then you get to sweep the sawdust. And I got to tell you, sometimes my attitude wasn't always great about it, but one of the things that I really appreciate about all four, you're great ambassadors. I got to tell you, every time I walk in, I get greeted. All of you say hello. I see once in a while, I watch you with constituents. Hello. You know, you're great ambassadors for the county, and I just want to say thank you very much. And I really appreciate that very much. As someone who grew up in the construction trade and worked on building houses, I want to say thank you. And because the fact is, when people come in, they see you, you got a smile on your face, you're working, and you're greeting people. I think that's great. It says a lot about Lane County. By the way, Herman, don't worry. Oregon basketball's right around the corner. And So, preseason number 5, so hopefully they'll hold up that end of it. Football hasn't quite held up the end of this year, but really, thank you very much for all the work you do. But most importantly, thank you for being a great ambassador for Lane County. Excellent. Thank you.
For those comments, Commissioner Farr.
Thanks, you guys. I say it to you guys every now and then. I'll thank you for the pride that I have in being able to walk into the facilities that we have here in Lane County. In my life, I worked for 2 great men. One was my dad, Henry Farr. The other was a guy called Jerry Oram, who has a little company called Jerry's. And both of those guys, the first thing I did for them was clean the parking lot. And what they instilled in me is that the most important thing that a person who enters your place of business, the most important moment is the first moment they enter. What that leads me to say is when I enter this building in the mornings, except when it's about 10 till 7 on Monday morning, when I enter this building on each morning, I just have an immense sense of pride. I mean, the work that you guys do goes beyond just regular work, and you instill the same kind of pride in me that my father and Jerry Oram tried to help me to instill in the people who worked around me and the people who worked who came to Tillamook Farmers Co-op, where my dad was the manager, and to Jerry's. To me, this is a world-class organization, and the reason it is a world-class organization, and the reason that people know that right from the moment they get here is everything is in place, everything is clean, everything is tidy. It's a place to really be proud of. Now, the photos that you have right here, you guys, we've stood out there, you and I have taken photos. I don't know, these may be my photos, I'm not sure, but if you've not been here at 7 o'clock on Monday morning, I don't know how mess gets inside of the fence also, but we have garbage cans every place, and people just pay no attention to those at all. And I don't know if the wind blows everything from the park blocks right here onto our facility, but it sure seems like it sometimes. But by the time we open for business on Monday morning, nobody knows that had happened. If you didn't come here at 7 o'clock, if you didn't see these photos, you wouldn't know what you all face each Monday morning when you come in. And what's really cool about it is I've never seen you not smiling, and I've never heard you grumbling. It's just a remarkable place to work, and I am proud to be here. Thank you. Thank you.
Commissioner Sorensen.
One thing that I think the public doesn't realize is that these buildings don't get cleaned up and they're not beautiful inside and around because it just happens that way. It's hard work. And every once in a while we get a chance on behalf of the community to thank all of you for all the hard work you do. It's been said a number of times, but I'll just say I don't think it's a bad thing to repeat it, that the public comes into this building, they expect good service, prompt service, they expect to find where they're going, and, without your work, the place would be a mess. There'd be the kind of messes that were, alluded to, and it wouldn't be a very pleasant place. And then on top of your basic job of helping to keep the place clean and organized, and you're also, the greeters, the people that try to take the first and second and sometimes third time visitors to this building in all the various ways that it's been designed over the years to help those people to find where they're going. And I think that's a really important part of our effort to be of service to people. It's the 360,000 people out there that pay the property taxes that support this place. And I think we show, through your work, we show that, we want to be of service to people. We want to take good care of their building. We want to make sure their building is properly maintained and is really available to the public for the business that needs to happen in this complex, and really all of the county buildings. So thank you so much.
Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you, and I don't know how much I can add to what's already been said. Great appreciation for the work you guys do. The second job I ever had in my life after a paper route was doing landscape work, so I know how hard and difficult and not great weather and all that stuff that is. The heat of the summer, the cold of the winter, the rain, doesn't matter, it's still got to get done. And after that, in college, I managed restaurants, and I can understand having to deal with bathrooms and the public, and a place that's open to the public, that some people don't think about who's actually going to have to clean up that mess. And generally, it was one of those things that I couldn't, even hand off to an employee sometimes. It was, you just had to do it yourself, and you guys do that well, and I really appreciate what you do. And to keep a smiling face to the public after dealing with some of the unthinking things the public do is pretty amazing, and I appreciate you guys for being able to do that.
Thank you. Well, I too want to say thank you to each of you. You are you're the front lines. You're the folks that we take for granted when we show up and we have a clean bathroom to be in, or a very presentable facility to the public. I've had the opportunity to work a little bit with the public in regards to a park, and so I am finding myself never more appreciative for people that are able to do that work day in and day out, because some of the things that you deal with are less than desirable. And I think it's been said, I'm amazed every time I see one of you in this building. You're always smiling. You're generally working very hard, racing. Matt's racing here and there, and Herman, and Don and Chris. I don't know how many times I see you each year in that breezeway cleaning those leaves up. I mean, as you no longer get it done one day, and the next day you're right back there doing it. And some of us, we don't have the opportunity to say thank you enough, but you're greatly appreciated. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, take a picture and.
Thank you, Mr. Mike Heising.
Matt. Gotta have the obligatory photograph.
Take a second here as we're getting a picture taken. All right, thanks.
Yeah, good.
Okay. So I'll move to now to item 6, which is our consent calendar. These items the board considers to be routine, and all the items are listed on our agenda. If you go to lanecounty.org, you can review the items and all the supplemental material that go with them for us to make a decision. They're generally acted in one motion unless a commissioner pulls one of them from the consent calendar. So with that, do we have a motion on the consent calendar? Commissioner Farr?
Mr. Chair, I move approval of the November 7th, 2016 Board of County Commissioners consent calendar.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passed unanimous. Thank you very much.
Actually, can you make note that's November 8th, not November 7th?
Yes, that's a good one. Thank you. Note that correction. So with that, we'll move to item 7, which is our Public Works. I'd like to welcome Corey Bueller, our Lane Events Center Manager, and we are working on Order 16-11-08-10 in the matter of awarding a rental agreement to Hockey Oregon LLC and delegating authority to the county administrator to execute a rental agreement with Hockey Oregon LLC for the use of the Lane County Ice Center. Welcome, Corey.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioners, thank you. Good morning, and thanks for giving me this opportunity to spend a couple minutes and just kind of bring you up to date on this item. As you guys remember, back in 2010, we did a facility assessment of the ice arena, and at that time we identified that the integrity of the slab and a lot of the components were getting close to failure or their life expectancy. We found permafrost issues. We had slab upheaval. It had appeared like we'd reached the lifetime expectancy of a lot of the equipment without major upgrades or renovations at that time. We concluded that we did not have the funds to replace or renovate the building and those items to continue operating it as an ice arena. So we came to you guys and had a discussion as to what the steps should be moving forward. So the things that we identified were either closing the facility to ice operations, generating other uses of the building, or reaching out to the public and see if we could identify any groups or entities that wanted to come in and operate the facility, running ice-related activities, up until the point that we saw a major failure or we deemed that we could not work on the deferred maintenance anymore to keep it operating. So at that time, Hockey Oregon LLC was formed, and they provided a proposal to us, which we brought to you, the board. They worked with the staff, and they fixed and repaired certain deficiencies at that time, and they have taken over the operations of the ice center. So each year, we reevaluate that, and we've now been in contract with them since 2010. So this year, what we thought we would do is just do our due diligence and see if anybody else needed the opportunity to come in and do that same type of work. We still cannot operate it ourselves as an ice center, so we went out and did a request for letters of interest to see if anybody was interested in coming in and operating it as an ice center. We did receive only one response, and that was Hockey Oregon LLC, which I believe that response is attached in your guys' packet. Financially, this has been a positive relationship for us. This historically was a building that was operating at a deficit, sometimes up to $200,000 to $300,000 a year. Since we've been in this relationship with them, we have not only not had a deficit, but in most of the years we average about $65,000 net revenue out of the operations there. So this building is also going to be included in our facility assessment, which we'll have started here very shortly. It actually should start here in December. While we won't spend a lot of time looking at if the permafrost has gotten bigger or smaller, we will take a look at the structure itself, some of the components and some of those things. So I think we'll see in the last 6 years where that deferred maintenance has gone and how much it truly has now. I still do not know what the life expectancy of that concrete slab is. It could be another year. It could be 5 more years. We just won't know. So with that in mind, we've kind of kept along the same guidelines, and that is as long as we can still allow it to be an ice arena and operate and providing an opportunity not only for the local community, but for those that need to travel for whether it's skating sessions or lessons or whatever it is. So.
Great, Corey. Thank you for being here today, and I want to thank Commissioner Farr. This was scheduled to be on the consent calendar, but this is really such a success story that started back in 2010 when we had a room full of very energized ice rink users, and we appreciate their guidance in that hard time, and staff's great work in finding a solution and the partnership that's been formed with Hockey Oregon. So thankful that they have made that successful in our community. So other comments? Mr. Sorensen?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think you're right in noting how big of a challenge it was at the time. I think you and I were commissioners then. I don't think the other commissioners had been sworn in yet, but to give you an idea, and this is just a perception, this is just my memory, I hope it's relatively accurate, but seriously, we had a small contingent of maybe 20, ice skating princesses and their families, and then we had about 20, 50-ish men who loved playing hockey because they were from the far reaches of the Midwest or East where hockey was a culture. And then the entire rest of the room, which seemed like to me over 200 people and their families of little kids dressed up in hockey outfits, I'm not really a hockey person, so I don't really know what to call that, but uniforms of their various teams. And the board voted a couple of times. Once was a vote to double the fees on the people, which failed. We didn't think that was enough money. And then we had a vote to triple the fees, which presumably would keep the facility going. And that was the first time in my, 40-year career as an elected official at various levels where we voted to raise fees substantially on people in front of us who cheered us for raising the fees. I think the parents, by the time they got to the door, realized that that was going to be a lot of money. But as a result of all that controversy, I think we could really thank the folks from the hockey community stepping up, and Corey and the staff at Lane Event Center for making this really work. And so the fact that we're discussing this today in this sort of pleasant setting, there was a heck of a lot of work that went into this moment, and I really appreciate that, and really I'm glad that this is happening. I had no idea, because I was raised on the Oregon coast, I had no idea how significant the ICE facility is, not just in Eugene, but Corvallis, Roseburg, Salem. We are a major facility for that type of use, and I know that it means a lot to people in our community to be able, and I also think there's an economic driver that occurs when we have sports facilities, amateur sports facilities or professional, in our community, and the ICE, Lane County ICE, is part of that. So anyway, I didn't want this moment to go by like, oh well, Corey did a good job, they concluded the agreement at the end. There was a lot that went into this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Farr?
Thank you. Corey, I'd offer my apologies for bringing you in this morning, but I really wanted people to hear the story that you just gave to us, and the one that Commissioner Sorensen just recited. But I also wanted to tell a little story. When we were courting a new county administrator a number of years ago, and I received a call. I was waiting for a call. I was the chair at the time, and where the new administrator who we'd offered the job to, I was waiting for him to call and accept the job. And the first question he said before I accept the job is, do you have a functioning ice arena? Actually not so, but I know that it is important to Mr. Mokrahysky that being from Wisconsin, that, a lot of people are here from other areas where ice skating is something that's very much a part of their life. It's the only ice arena, I think, in Oregon, maybe other than Portland. Is that correct?
Portland, and I believe Bend.
Maybe Bend, that's right. But so as Commissioner Sorensen said, people come from all over to use our facility. And it's just, I remember back in 2010, when it was such a big hubbub around town that the ice arena was going to close, and people who had never skated all of a sudden wanted to go skating. And now they have an opportunity. Thanks very much. Thanks for coming in this morning and telling the story. And thank you, Commissioner Sorensen, for the historical context.
Others? Okay. So with that, I would entertain a motion to approve Order 16-11-08-10.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I move approval of Order 16-11-08-10.
Second.
We have a second. And just to be clear, it's not to delete, it's delegating authority. Okay. Any further comments?
It's also awarding a rental agreement as well as delegating the authority. So, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
All in favor?
Aye.
And no opposed? Pass unanimous.
Thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great work.
Okay. Item 8 is the Sheriff's Office. It's the first reading and setting the second reading and public hearing for Ordinance 16-09 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 20 to create a system for exercising emergency powers during a disaster, setting the second reading and public hearing for December 6th. We have with us Linda Cook, our Emergency Management Program Manager, and our Legal Counsel, Stephen Dingle.
Morning, Chair Stewart, Board of Commissioners. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a summary, a little bit of the historical background that brought us here, and then I'll turn it over to Ms. Cook, who's really the expert, substantive expert in this area. You'll recall that last year, for the first time, I believe the event that started the conversation was an exercise that was prepared by Ms. Cook that involved the board. And at that time, there was a clear desire on the part of the board to come up with to put some things down in writing, which I think Ms. Cook will talk about later, how important that is ahead of events. And we took what I would, and I think Ms. Cook would agree, were the small sort of baby steps towards dealing with that. And that really was limited to agreement on the part of the board as to how much authority Mr. Mokrahajski would have to exercise and how you all would communicate and make decisions in the event of a disaster. After that, I invited Ms. Cook to make a presentation on behalf of the Oregon County Councils Association, and she discussed with them the importance of a more comprehensive ordinance. And you'll recall that when you adopted the small piece that we talked about last year, we agreed that we would bring it back on an annual basis for review to see if there's anything else that needed to be included. Watching the presentation with Ms. Cook, and I talked to her afterwards, we both recognize the importance of having a comprehensive ordinance. So that's what you have in front of you, not just Mr. Mokrahajski's authority or how you all are going to communicate, but this covers really is comprehensive. It covers the entire gamut. And what I want to make sure that everyone understands is that this brings us the powers and the authority and the process that's outlined in this ordinance is taken from state and federal law. So I know for example, this isn't a Lane County Board of Commissioners can't just declare an emergency and invoke these powers. They're very specifically defined. And I would specifically draw your attention to the very last section of the ordinance, which makes clear that this ordinance is intended to be consistent with federal law and Oregon law, which including but not limited to disasters, but that would also incorporate the individual civil rights that everyone has. It's not intended to in any way be inconsistent with that. So with that general framework, I'll turn it over to Ms. Cook.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Stewart and Commissioners. Thank you for considering this item. We came to you September 13th with a discussion draft of this ordinance, and at that time, it seemed like a reasonable thing for us to continue taking additional steps towards getting this ordinance in place. And just to also remind you that this is intended to be an ordinance that gets invoked. The powers that are outlined in this ordinance get invoked after a disaster has been declared or it's evident that a disaster declaration would be imminent. And so these are not powers that are taken lightly. These are special powers that need to be invoked during situations where life and property are at risk, are being threatened with some form of harm. And I think that the most crucial part to this ordinance for me as an emergency manager and those of us who work in the Emergency Operations Center is the fact that it gives us one place to go to locate what we are allowed to do under law during a crisis. There's nothing worse than having your mind racing with so many different variables to cope with during a major crisis and then having to stop and ask yourself, is this something that we're allowed to do? Can we close a sidewalk, for example? Are we allowed to do that? And while some answers may, in a normal course of business, be very easy to answer, when you're faced with a very stressful situation, sometimes rational thought just goes out the window and you can't remember things. So this gives us one place to refer to when a disaster strikes that tells us what are the emergency powers that we are allowed to invoke. And again, I want to stress that they're only to be invoked during a crisis event. And it doesn't mean that carte blanche, everything in the document will all of a sudden become something that everybody runs out and tries to do. It's really a menu of things that are allowable. So it would only trigger the things that are actually needed. In other words, if we don't need special spending powers or we don't need a special permit, we're not going to just all of a sudden say, oh, okay, we're in a disaster situation now, that means we have special spending powers. No, those special spending powers need to be related specifically to the incident and either mitigating or responding or recovering from that. So with that, I think I will leave it to you for any questions you might have of me or Mr. Dingle.
And if I could add one thing, I think it's critically important, in addition to the decision-making process that Ms. Cook outlined, to have the rules in place before something happens. Not only that does it make it easier, it lets everyone understand what's happening as it's happening, that it's not an ad hoc, sort of on the fly, off the cuff thing. These rules are in place when you know, God forbid that the board should have to invoke these 3 years from now, and be able to point back to this ordinance and say, look, we made this decision 3 years ago before any of this ever happened. It's not like we're making this up in response to this. And I think that's critical for transparency and for the confidence of the public when and if that event occurs.
Okay. Questions? Commissioner Sorensen?
Do you know if any other counties have enacted a similar ordinance based upon Mr. Dingle's representation that this is really following up on federal and state law? Have other counties enacted similar emergency ordinances, or not, I wouldn't call them emergency ordinances, but ordinances that help us prepare for the inevitability of emergencies of different, levels of magnitude? And my question is, are we pioneering this because, Linda, you're such a great leader in this process, which I really appreciate, or is this something where other counties, because of emergency managers like you, are going to their commissioners and saying, hey, we do need to straighten all this out. We want to make sure what powers various people have during emergencies. Can you go into some detail about that?
Sure. I considered that question as well, and I sent an email to my colleagues throughout the state, and I found that counties and cities were in different places with regard to having something in place. Washington County and Marion County have ordinances in place, as do the city of Portland and our own city of Springfield. Others wrote back saying something that's been long overdue. Others wrote, I don't know, I need to check with county council. So I did get 4 affirmative responses with references to their documents.
And are ours following up on that, or would you describe ours as being different or mostly the same, or pretty much all following the same basic script of what are the powers of the governor and what are the powers of the FEMA and how that relates to what we're going to be doing?
Ours is consistent in so much that it's delineating the special powers very much at the local level. City of Portland was probably the broadest reaching, I thought, in terms of they have a line in theirs that basically says we can do these things and anything else deemed necessary. So it was pretty broad, and I was surprised to see that, but I understand why they would have something like that in there, because there are so many unanticipated, unexpected things that happen during a disaster. By and large, I started to do a crosswalk and started to go cross-eyed instead, trying to line up who's doing what. And I realized that I stepped back and realized the gist of it is that these jurisdictions are giving power to their local governing bodies, like Mr. Dingle said, ahead of time, so that there's no question and that doesn't become a distraction during the response, but we already have it worked out, we already know what the protocol will be, and we can move forward without everybody scrambling. Could you imagine us having this discussion when we've got a disaster going on outside? That would not be the best time to have it. So that's really what I took away from reading the other ordinances, is that it is a way to clarify what local government can do. And I will say ours is very comprehensive and very detailed, and that was acknowledged by my peers. And so I guess we could look at it and say maybe we don't want to be that specific. I I like the specificity because then there is no debate during the crisis about, what we can and cannot do. So the overall gist is the same. The specificity in ours probably is greater than what is in the others.
Good. I don't know if the other commissioners were able to do this, but in preparing for this, I personally binge watched the Designated Survivor so that I could be up to speed with just how important this topic is.
Perfect. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, it was a sacrifice.
Okay.
Commissioner Bozievich?
Thank you. I don't have any real questions other than I just want to comment. Thank you for putting this together, both of you. I think it was well done, and you may say it's very comprehensive. It's only 5 pages long. So it's pretty condensed. That's not a lot when you talk about, thousands of pages of federal laws. 5 pages is all you have to do to see what we have authority-wise and how we've delegated that authority and various issues related to emergencies. I really appreciate this. It kind of follows up on my chairmanship where I wanted to focus on resilience. And, as part of that, we had that exercise that kind of led to the aha moment of how do we communicate during an emergency. When we had that ICS exercise with the board and pretended there was an emergency and figured out what would happen if one board member couldn't attend and could they attend by text and how all that works out. And this kind of sets all that in stone. Really appreciate it. And I have to give a hat tip to Commissioner Farr, too, because this really kind of sort of started when he was chair in the Yellow Point fire. And the understanding of when something, that disasters don't happen at 9 o'clock on Tuesday morning. In his case, it was just after 5 on a Friday afternoon, and trying to find folks that could actually answer the question about whether we could agree to basically a mutual aid agreement and allow the use of county property by the Oregon Department of Forestry to fight a forest fire. We didn't have that well set out, and this will allow us to make those decisions quickly, easily, without the question of, do I have, can I say yes? And this spells it out, and I really appreciate that. So I look forward to us getting to the second reading and public hearing.
Okay, thank you. Others? Commissioner Lycan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I would agree with Commissioner Bozievich. Thank you for doing this. And I think it makes a lot of sense. And having lived through the Thurston High School shooting, it's pretty amazing when you see your emergency operators, which, by the way, at that time in 1998 didn't necessarily have something like this. But I got to tell you, they were a well-oiled machine and really set a good example, I think, overall of what could happen. And I, talking to our colleagues down in Roseburg area, Douglas County, went to Umpqua Community College, I always bring up the significant difference between the two because shootings, no matter what, are horrid. Springfield had Eugene next door, University of Oregon, Lane County. I mean, the overall work and collaboration that occurred was significant. Douglas County, they're by themselves. And they didn't have, all of a sudden, all of this unbelievable support and collaboration. Now, Lane Community College, Lane County, I know we sent folks down to help with that. But at the time, I mean, frankly, I thought they did a remarkable job considering that it happened in an isolated area, especially over in Umpqua Community College, which is not even close to an urban area. I mean, it's 10 to 15 miles away from the city of Roseburg. So about 10 miles, I think. So I really appreciate the work going into this. I also bring up, I remember the hydrogen truck there at 126 Expressway. That was only 2 years after 9/11. So when Homeland Security is being notified, I mean, it was like, wow, okay. But you talk about the what could happen if a truck like that, if that inside of it did collapse and cause that explosion. I mean, that would have been very, very serious. Of course, it wasn't, but that just seemed pretty chaotic at the time. So I think having some of this involved, and especially with in where we're located, I think what you outlined, let alone having, talking about the Cascadia, not even talking about that, but the slide issue, the floods, this type of thing. I mean, we have in our area potential for natural disasters. So this is really much appreciated, and I want to say thank you very much.
Great. Okay, others? Commissioner Farr?
Thank you. A lot of work went into this, obviously. When I was on the Eugene City Council in 1998 and 1999, we got ready for the imminent disaster, Y2K. It didn't come to pass, obviously, but we thought we were ready. But based upon the work that you've done on this and based upon reading what you've done, we really weren't ready then. The chain of command was not really fully established. And what you've done today is what you've done by this work is establishing the chain of command, establishing the decision-making process. And just a slight correction for Commissioner Bozievich, it's about 3 o'clock in the morning that Sheriff Tom called me. And he said, I woke up in the middle of the night, phone's ringing, who's calling? Hello, this is Sheriff Turner. Oh boy, this is probably good news, huh, Sheriff? So the old adage.
The event started at 5. Call didn't come till 3.
Call came at 3. I presume by then he'd called everybody else.
Or chair last to know, right?
But you make decisions based upon the information that you have, and when you're standing on a rattlesnake, you're not always equipped to make the best decisions unless you've practiced it, unless you have a protocol in place, and that's what you're establishing as a protocol. And a protocol that we can all stand by, that we can all live with, and we can all make certain that we're making the right decisions when ultimately the decision has to be made. So thank you very much for this hard work.
And the final thing I would say, too, is to understand this is not a, just an end of the process. Ms. Cook and I plan on reviewing this annually. It's viewed as organic because this is changing, will change by experience and maybe other people's experience. So we'll at least review it, and if we think there are additions that need to be made or changes, we plan on bringing that back to the board. But we're going to look at it annually each year.
And thanks for that. During the drill that we did, we discussed emerging technology, text messages and emails and telephone messages. A year from now, we may have something may have wrist radios. But, the fact that you're looking at it continually, probably not even every year, if something emerges, you'll look at it as it emerges. So thank you very much once again.
Okay. Commissioner Sorensen?
I just want to mention that when I was chair of the board some time ago, that I got a call, I think it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, from the sheriff, and it had to do with a SWAT team incident in the south part of the county. And it basically was a question about, do we need to call the board in on this? Does there need to be a special meeting of the board? And I think that, because Commissioner Farr had the same experience regarding a forest fire, I'm sure everybody's had this experience that's been chair, where something arises and there's really maybe there is a playbook, but the playbook's locked in the cabinet and they're calling you on your cell phone, and you don't entirely know what to do. So I think that obviously what we all do is we do the best under the circumstances, but I think you're wise to have not only a protocol that is written, and certainly we can be somewhat of a leader to other communities and other counties specific in Oregon that have the same statutory, federal and state statutory issues that we do. But it's also a matter of then making sure that the people know their roles, because every January, or at least every 2 years, we have the potential of having a new board of commissioners. This year we won't, but I've been here at times when we've had, 2 new commissioners come in, and these, as was pointed out, these incidents don't occur when we want them to, and so, theoretically, we'll get 3 commissioners or 2 commissioners in one election. A month later, while they're still trying to figure out how to get their computer opened, we have this kind of horrible thing, and maybe we have a very experienced sheriff, which would be great in that scenario. But it still wouldn't really mean that we would be fully up and running and trained on what to do. And so I think training is part of it, follow-up is part of it. And I think that we'll see if there's other issues that are raised at the public hearing that the public might want to, talk about. I did want to ask about the idea of a sunset in this whole thing, and whether or not that would force the review that Mr. Dingell is talking about, and the pros and cons of a sunset.
Chair Stewart and Board, and Commissioner Sorensen, I don't have a preference one way or the other. My concern is that, or what I'm trying to do is I'm putting, with the assistance of Ms. Jones, certain things that happen that need to be reviewed on an annual basis, and I suppose that your confidence that that's going to happen would impact that decision. I really don't have a feeling one way or another. I don't know what Ms. Cook thinks.
Not having really given that particular concept a lot of thought, my initial reaction would be that perhaps we would not want to sunset this. I think that this is something that needs to be in place in perpetuity, knowing that if something were to happen that would cause, reasonable people to think, okay, we don't want this ordinance in place anymore, then I suppose it could be revoked at time.
When you talk about having it reviewed, what are you talking about?
Most importantly, in my perspective, and I'll let Mr. Dingell also respond, I would want to check all references to ORS where it says, you'll see that there are places in there where it says ORS and then in parentheses it's 2016. I would want to double check and make sure that those those statutes are still in place and that they, whether or not they've been updated in some fashion. I would also, as part of the normal course of business as an emergency manager, I'm made aware of new laws that are passed with that could pertain to this. I would want to have those incorporated as appropriate. And then also, factoring any lessons learned from any situations we may have encountered in the previous 12 months, factoring in do we need to alter any of this language because for some reason it was unclear when we tried to invoke some of the powers.
And Chair Stewart, Commissioner Sorensen, my thought on the annual review was just that, because what we've really made an effort to do is bring it down to the local level and put in one place those powers which are granted by the state. So you'll see a number of references to Oregon law, because that's what Oregon law grants certain powers to local bodies. And so I would be reviewing it every year to make sure that if there were changes at the state level that that they were incorporated in this, and also whether or not, as Ms. Cook pointed out, we have the benefit of some experience and we realize something should be changed. So that would be my annual review every year. It might be as simple as coming before the board and say, we've looked at the emergency ordinance. There have been no substantive changes in state or federal law that we think need to be incorporated. We've had no incidents that we think have taught us any lessons learned that require to be changed. And perhaps Ms. Cook would testify or present information to the board that she's not aware of any new substantive developments in the field that would be, that she thinks need to be incorporated into the ordinance.
Could that be an annual report component of this ordinance that would distinguish that from a sunsetting where the ordinance would go away? I mean, I'm looking for something in between. Commissioner, I promise we'll review this every year versus this ordinance goes away unless the board reenacts it. I'm looking for something in between, and maybe an annual report. And again, the timing of that is important because we have the election. I mean, this is on my mind today because of the election, but we have the election in November. We have the new board taking office in January. So if we have the if we have the report to the board relatively early in the calendar year, then it gives the new board every 2 years, and maybe that's another way in terms of budgeting, well, maybe have it do every 2 years. See, I'm looking for some compromise here that's going to give us the reviewing of it. What I'm afraid of is it's going to get enacted, and then Ms. Cook's going to retire or get a better job. Okay, I know Mr. Dingle's going to retire, so it's a given. But, so, you know what I'm saying? I want to make sure there's some ongoing look at this.
Well, and actually, it's interesting you should mention that, because I thought it would be an excellent thing to have with new commissioners, so that it would be right at the front of their mind. That would be one of the things I would think that they would want to know. So we could certainly add language that says that this ordinance shall be, a report shall be prepared for the board no later than February 1st of each year by the emergency manager and county council.
I also have another suggestion. Our emergency operations plan has moved by state mandate from a 5-year update cycle to a 2-year update cycle. And we could incorporate this ordinance in as an annex to the emergency operations plan, which would require it to be reviewed and adopted as part of that document every other year. And we are on the threshold of bringing that to you, and if January would be the ideal time, I can bring you the latest update, it'll be, if we go in January, it'll be the 2017 update of the Lane County Emergency Operations Plan, and then it's not only then the county who's requiring that it be reviewed every 2 years, but you also have the state mandate that that plan be reviewed, so we could incorporate it therein.
Thanks.
Other comments? Commissioner Farr? Oh, I'm sorry.
Ready for a motion?
I was just going to add real briefly that we also Ms. Jones keeps a list of annual renewals, so we can, this item can be placed on that list. And I think you've got a couple of places that we can ensure that, regardless of individual positions potentially changing at some point in the future, that the item would get reviewed on a regular basis.
And then a report submitted to the board at that time.
Right.
Okay. One question before we have a motion. Ms. Cook, do you have a recommendation as to, right now, maybe we just leave the hearing whenever it fits in the schedule, or would you like a time certain for the hearing?
Well, time certain would be much more manageable.
So a morning time certain?
Yes, that would be ideal. Thank you.
10:30? 10?
Perfect.
10:30? Okay. Commissioner Farr, then?
Mr. Chair, I have a motion, but first, Mr. Dingle, there's going to be a slight rewording in the ordinance based upon Commissioner Swanson's input and approval. I'm presuming that won't change the fact that we can pass the ordinance at the after the second reading if we're ready to.
Commissioner, I don't think so, Commissioner. Mr. Mokrahysky indicates that morning is full.
Yeah, just in your motion, if you could just give us flexibility for when we schedule, we'll work with Ms. Cook to make sure everyone's available at that time, but that morning is full.
And possibly by the agenda setting the week before, we can actually come up with a time certain, possibly. So.
Right.
Very well. Then I move approval of the first reading in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 20 to recreate a system for exercising emergency powers during a disaster, and set a second reading and public hearing of Ordinance 1609 for December 6, 2016.
Do we have a second?
Second, and then I have a question.
Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you. So is that going to include some change in language relative to the annual review? Is that what I'm understanding? The second
That was the
reading
question
law?
I asked.
I had actually written under the last section 20.060, I've added a sub 4 that would read, this ordinance shall be reviewed as part of the biannual review of and adoption of the emergency operation plan.
So having read that out loud, can we include that as part of the first reading so we do not have to go to a third reading because we don't read it out loud today? We're going to be in a third reading.
Right.
That's why I was asking the question. So if the, as the second, I'm okay with that.
Yes, we've incorporated that. Thank you.
Just want to make sure that was clear, that that was part of the first reading for the record.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Farr has got a speaking engagement, so he's excused to hopefully travel safely to that. And good luck.
Thank you.
And so we'll move to item 9, which is county council announcements. Do we have
No announcements, Commissioner.
no announcements? Great. County administration announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if the commissioners were aware of this. Today is election day. Really? I heard Commissioner Sorensen mention that. So I thought I would make a couple comments. As Commissioner Farr walks out, I wanted to just note that we have 4 county officials on the ballot today. Actually 5 with the Justice of the Peace. It'll be the first election for our new sheriff, Byron Trapp, the first election for our newly appointed district attorney, Patty Perlow, the second election, and for Commissioner Farr. And I wanted to make special mention. It's my understanding today is the 20th, roughly the 20th anniversary of when Commissioner Sorensen was first elected. That would make this nearing the end of your 5th term and the potential for your 6th term here. I think we're all waiting to see the outcome. I know everyone is on pins and needles to see the outcome of all of these races, and so we'll hold our judgment on what's going to happen after today. But I wanted to recognize the elected officials here who've served with great distinction, and particularly Commissioner Sorensen. I believe this would make Commissioner Sorensen the longest-serving commissioner in the history of Lane County, and so we'll have more of an opportunity, I know, at the State of the County and the swearing in to talk more about that, but didn't want the moment to pass without recognizing our local elections. And I also thought I would provide a brief update to you on our elections process. We've received, this is as of yesterday at about 6 p.m., we'd received 147,787 ballots as of 4 p.m. Yesterday. That's a 56% return. We picked up additional ballots last night at 6 p.m., so those are not included in that number. We're just about exactly at the 2008 numbers, general election numbers, when we had an 87.66% return, although we expect very heavy numbers today on election day. From a customer service standpoint, our elections office assisted over 1,025 customers so far. We've had 566 phone calls, over 459 customers in our office yesterday. That was yesterday alone. Driver teams will be picking up ballots throughout the day at all of our drop site locations, 21, I believe we have 21 drop site locations. Election results will be posted shortly after 8 p.m. tonight, and then again will be updated at approximately 10 p.m., midnight, and 2 a.m., and then when our staff leaves for the morning, so you can tell it's going to be a long day for our elections team. You can go to lanecounty.org/elections. I think, as everyone knows, we are participating in the Secretary of State's new statewide website. It's really great if you haven't had a chance to see this now. Lane County has our own page on the state's site. We're linking to that from our lanecounty.org/elections page, and so you'll be able to click on specific Lane County returns, but you can also see statewide returns on ballot measures and statewide offices, so it's a really great improvement. I want to recognize Cheryl Betchart, our county clerk, our elections staff, our full-time and extra help staff that we have, in addition to Greg Rickoff, our operations director, and Devin Ashbridge, our public information officer. All these folks have done just a phenomenal job this year of a really historic registration of voters in Lane County. We have a video, as Commissioner Sorensen mentioned, that we've put out to talk about the process, really the incredible, open, objective, accountable process that we have in Oregon and here in particular in Lane County to ensure that every vote gets counted accurately in our county, and so encourage people to go out, go to our website and see that. So we'll provide more information in the coming weeks on the outcome of the election. People still can turn in their ballots at any of the drop site locations or at our elections office today. You can't mail it in. It's too late to mail it in, but you can drop it off at drop site locations. If you have questions, please contact our elections office. Second thing, Mr. Chair, that I wanted to note is, of course, one of the reasons that we get to exercise the right and privilege to vote is that is a unique right and privilege in our country that not all people across the world are able to do. One of the reasons we're able to do that is because of the men and women who've served our country in the military and protected the freedoms that we enjoy here at home. And Friday being Veterans Day, I wanted to recognize both the individuals in our community who are veterans and the individuals in our organization who are veterans and part of the military. We actually have a number of county employees who are in the military, members of the military. One I'll note in my office, Jeff Kincaid, who is a first lieutenant in the Oregon National Guard, and several other employees in Lane County who serve in our military. We estimate that we have around 29,452 veterans as of the end of September of this year, September 30th. Last year, and of course, Lane County provides services to veterans throughout Lane County. Last year, Lane County Veteran Services had 5,240 one-on-one appointments with veterans or their survivors. Of that, 809 were during outreach efforts in Florence, Oak Ridge, Cottage Grove, and Lane Community College. I want to recognize Joseph, we know him as Joby, Riley, our Veteran Service Coordinator, and our Veteran Services staff, who do just a phenomenal job. Lane County is recognized, I believe last year was recognized as having the most veterans claims. So the most benefits that are being claimed by any county in the state of Oregon. We provide benefits including VA health assistance in enrolling in VA health care, service-connected benefits, VA pension benefits, assisting surviving spouses in applying for benefits. Our staff works closely with the local VA healthcare staff to ensure that our veterans are getting the care that they need and they're aware of our services so they can apply for benefits that they may be entitled to. We have great working relationships with the VA staff and the VA regional office in Portland and St. Paul, Minnesota, where those claims are processed. Our staff does a wonderful job of troubleshooting that work through the VA. And finally, our staff in Veteran Services does a great job of partnering with the VA itself. They present information at long-term care facilities on how veterans can get access to services. They're part of the Circuit Court for Lane County Veterans Treatment Team to assist justice involve veterans and address low-level offenses that may result from issues ultimately related to military cause for mental health or other conditions. And they meet monthly with the Lane County VetNet, a consortium of the VA and local veteran specific service providers to ensure that they're able to make appropriate referrals to other services that clients may need beyond their expertise. So again, as Friday being Veterans Day, I wanted to recognize the great work that our Veterans Services staff does, our employees who are veterans or who are serving in the military, and people throughout our community who have served in the military, and recognize that certainly in conjunction with today being Election Day. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Comments? Commissioner Wozovich?
Thank you, and I'll just note that the veterans population of Lane County grew by 1 last night when I returned from Delaware with my father-in-law who served in World War II. And it's an honor to have him living with us for a while. But I just wanted to look back at my State of the County address real quick, and the total compensation and payments in 2014 that veterans and their families, survivors, received in Lane County was over $140 million in that year, which was the highest of any county in Oregon. And what's notable about that is we're the fourth down in population, where Multnomah County actually has twice of our population, yet we have more benefits coming into Lane County than Multnomah. And I think that's what, when Mr. Mokohiski mentions that being number one, that's what we're talking about is our ability to get those benefits to our veterans and help them navigate the system. And Joby and his staff have just been wonderful at doing that. And it's amazing that we're leading the state, even though we're not the largest county.
Thank you for adding that. That's good. I'd just like to say, Mr. Mokohiski, thank you for taking this time to, again today, to call out some excellent work by our employees. An update on the elections. Appreciate earlier Commissioner Sorensen talked about the integrity of our system. I'd just like to reiterate Commissioner Bozovich and myself both went through recounts of our election 2 years ago. And there was minute, if any, change to the recount from the machine to the hand count. So I want to assure folks that I am very confident of the integrity of our system that we have in place and the incredible employees that we have and volunteers that are working with us during this potentially record time for elections. So I appreciate that being called out, and I also really appreciate the time taken to call out the great services that our veteran services folks are supplying or giving to our constituents, and also the folks that serve in this organization that have served our country. So thank you very much. Any other comments? Okay. I'd like to move to item 10B, which is action that's approved correspondence to federal delegation on forestry-related budget negotiations. And we have Alex Kyler, our Intergovernmental Relations Manager. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, before you have a letter that I drafted to Senator Wyden and to Congressman Peter DeFazio. This letter was drafted in anticipation that these two members have already been appointed to the conference committee on the energy bill. The anticipation is that there is some suggestion that the energy bill conference will try to be completed during the lame duck session of Congress, which will start, I believe, tomorrow. There's 16 days in the lame duck, so there's a lot of question whether or not what sort of things will be addressed during this session. Clearly, they've got to take care of the budget. The federal funding runs out in first week in December, so they've got to do that. But there is some thinking that they will also try to move forward on this conference to complete the energy bill. And I felt like it was important for the board to address, in particular, the forestry title. And so what happened with the energy bill is that there's a Senate version and a House version. The Senate version was passed by the Senate, moved to the House, and was amended by the House. And so that is what they're conferencing on, is that amended Senate bill. The House version was passed by the House, went to the Senate, but was not voted on in the Senate. So the conference is on this amended Senate bill. The background here is that what the House did, they amended the Senate's version with a number of issues, and in particular, they inserted into the Senate bill all of H.R. 2647 in its entirety, and this is the Healthy Forests Act. It's, called the Resilient Federal Forest Act. So they've stuck that into the bill, and there are several provisions in that measure that I've highlighted in the draft for your consideration that I think would be worth it for us to emphasize to these two conference members. So it's not the entirety of H.R. 2647 that is addressed in the letter, There's four issues that I highlight. The first being wildlife suppression funding, the second, secure rural schools provisions. The third is state-supported forest management fund. And then the fifth is the streamlined environmental analysis and categorical exclusion. So there's a number of other things in the measure that I chose not to focus on. There has been some discussion that I've read about in Congress where President Obama has already sort of suggested parts of the bill that he does not like, and I guess that he's actually issued some veto notifications on those parts. And so the conferees are avoiding those things that would lead to a veto. This particular language, the forestry title, was not mentioned as part of the veto. So I think we're in fairly safe territory suggesting to the two conferees where the emphasis from Lane County is. But I guess, what I'm trying to do here is to at least get some correspondence from the county to recognize that this conference is going and to emphasize those particular points within the forestry title of the bill. I'm happy to address any questions that you might have about this. I can tell you, just as a little bit more background, H.R. 2647 passed the House. There were 19 Democrats that lent their vote to that passage. Congressman DeFazio was one of them. Kurt Schrader was the other. They both voted for the bill as it went out of the House. That bill went over to the Senate. It was heard in the Senate Agriculture Committee. They did some amending to the bill, reported it out, and it's sort of sitting, waiting for action on the Senate's calendar. When the Senate energy bill came over to the House and got amended, there were only eight Democratic votes in support of that amendment. And notably, Congressman DeFazio did not support the amendments that were made to the energy bill in the House, but Congressman Schrader did. So that's just a little bit of additional background for you.
Okay. Commissioner Sorensen?
So the big bill is an energy bill.
The big bill is a 792-page energy bill. Correct.
Okay. And is there a way in one or two sentences to summarize 800 pages of federal legislation and say, well, it deals with all kinds of energy? Or how would you describe the big part of the bill?
Chairman Stewart and Commissioner Sorensen, I anticipated that question from you, and I'm just not very versed on all the parts and pieces of the energy bill. You may recall that the energy bill was one of the very first things that the Obama administration took up in their first term and was unable to move it forward. So there's a number of things in the bill that are authorized. I can tell you there's some particular provisions that I think Lane County would be interested in. The Land and Water Conservation Fund is made permanent in the energy bill. That's one that I can recall that's in there, but unfortunately I can't really speak to everything that's in that measure.
Yeah. Okay, on the forestry part, then, is this taking the House-passed forestry bill, and that has a name like Healthy Forest Act or something?
Resilient, I think it's Resilient Federal Forest Act.
Resilient Federal Forest Act. So this Forest Act that passed the House but wasn't voted on by the Senate, you believe basically that in the conference committee on the big bill, the forest bill is going to get shoved in. Is that a fair?
The forest bill
The verb might not be fair, but the concept.
Chairman Stewart, Commissioner Sorensen, I think, actually no, the forestry bill has already been placed into it and voted on. So it's the amended version of the Senate bill, the House amended version. So it's all, that language is already in there in its entirety.
Okay.
And what I'm suggesting is that I doubt it will survive in its entirety coming out of the conference. But what I'm hoping is that at least to our two members of the delegation, we can emphasize, if you cannot pass the entire thing, which I think we recognize they probably would not, at least pay particular attention to these 4 items. And there are in particular, the fire borrowing element is something that I think is on a number of people's minds across the United States regarding fire borrowing. The SRS provisions are really good and are things that we have actually asked for in the past, including allowing Title III to be used for sheriff patrol and for training purposes and equipment purposes for search and rescue. I think the categorical exclusion stuff actually has enough sidebars to be fairly reasonable. And then this state-supported fund, I talked to the Department of Forestry, in fact, this morning about it. If you go back to the tour you just did, or up in the Willamette National Forest, the Oregon legislature last year appropriated $5 million to be used statewide for those kinds of activities on federal forests. And the language in the energy bill now would create this state support fund, and it would just be a much better mechanism for states to contribute to the Forest Service for purposes of increased planning and operational activities on the forests.
And I'll just finish by saying I'm in favor of sending the letter. As everyone knows, I have concerns about limiting, procedural rights to people that are trying to enforce federal laws. But I think that's a minor part of this letter, and I think the other parts are pretty important. Thanks.
Thank you. Other comments? Yeah. I guess I would want to thank you for following this and having us in the position to be able to make some comments and recognizing the challenges that the federal government, our legislature faces back there. And just a couple comments on the 4 items. The state-supported Forest Management Fund, what we learned has produced some very positive results. It's seen increased management of the forest, and it's also allowed for the Oregon Department of Forestry and the United States Forest Service to be able to retain some employees that they wouldn't have been able to retain. So I don't know if there's worth maybe adding those 2 positive inputs. I'm not sure that they're called out here. And it says, while we're not entirely impressed now that it takes the state funding for the agency, that the language in the bill would be more appropriate for future funding. I don't know if we want to just call out those 2 pretty positive components of at least what I saw on the tour.
And I'm sorry, Chairman Stewart, I got the retaining federal employees. The second was?
Just the increased forest management, on-the-ground forest management.
Got it.
Getting through the planning process.
Right. And then I don't know if there's a place, if it would be appropriate to add it in the wildfire suppression or possibly the streamlined environmental analysis category. But I'm sure that Congressman DeFazio and Senator Wyden recognize the challenges with the, the drier summers that we've had with the increased fire that we've experienced. So I don't know with the, if we want to add maybe just a little bit more called out to the fact that we're experienced 3 very dry summers in a row that's caused our forests to be susceptible to fire, and also it's increased some of the mortality in our forests. So I don't know what my colleagues think, but I just thought maybe just a little bit of a reference, specifically what we're seeing might help them. Okay. Other comments on the letter? Commissioner Bozievich?
I really support the what we're emphasizing in this letter, and it's really important. And I really, the wildfire suppression funding is really a big issue. And it's not just for Oregon, but it's the borrowing that goes on that then leads to the reason why we're having to do state-supported funding further down under Title VI is because they're borrowing all the money for normal Forest Service operations to fight fire on Forest Service land from their operating budget, and then they don't have the rest of the budget to go out and do the planning work to do restoration work out on the landscape that would prevent further forest fires. So it's a vicious cycle that they don't get the planning work done, they don't do the restoration work. The forest is more susceptible, whether it's drier summers or not, when you're not managing that forest in a way that makes it healthier and able to resist fire. The fires are bigger, cost more to fight. You borrow those monies up, and then you don't plan, and you don't do restoration work, and it goes on and on and on. And it's sad that we're, yes, in our tour up there in Oak Ridge, the Willamette National Forest has made great use of the state lottery funds and done some of that pre-planning work and survey work and preparing for the restoration work that's going to make, particularly in that area, the U.S. Forest Service lands that are up against the residential interface there around Oak Ridge and some of the more rural residences, and trying to thin those down to a reasonable number of trees and get rid of underbrush and make them more resilient to fire and easier to fight fire. But the reason we're having to use lottery monies for funding those planning efforts and preparing for that restoration work is because the Forest Service is borrowing that money away to fight fire in the first place. So that issue about the fire borrowing is huge. And it would be really nice if we didn't have to use lottery funds to support a federal service that used to actually supply funding to counties and schools. That used to be a major funder of school services and roadway transportation funding was U.S. Forest Service timber harvest. And now we're taking state lottery money and putting it into the Forest Service. It just seems to really something, although very useful, and I think the way you describe it as being used as seed money and the opportunity maybe for payback later makes more sense than us just having a mechanism now to try and kind of stimulate work that should be being done by the Forest Service anyway if they weren't borrowing away all their operating funds fighting fires. So I think this is a really important letter, and I look forward to us sending it off.
Great. Mr. Kyler.
Chair Stewart and Commissioner Bozovich, I do want to be clear that the fund that's created, and talking to the Department of Forestry this morning, we believe could be used almost like a revolving loan fund, so monies earned do return to the fund. It's a little less clear whether states can actually be reimbursed out of the fund. I think the way we've got it worded here, it's probably sufficient.
Yeah.
But I did want to be clear, we're not completely convinced that there's a reimbursement mechanism, but the good news is that it does say that fund gets reimbursed, and then the fund may be continued to be used for planning purposes, which I think is particularly important language in that section.
Yeah, not exactly payback, but a way of refunding the fund so it will continue to work.
Yes.
And won't be sucked away for firefighting.
Thank you. And I would add that, in my thought process, and I think it's called out in this, is that, in the grand scheme of running the National Forest, $5 million inclusion or increase has really created some very positive benefits. And hopefully they can see that a small investment can make a big difference. Okay, other comments on the correspondence? Like to entertain a motion to
Sure.
Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'd like to move approval of sending correspondence to the Federal Delegation on forestry-related budget negotiations. That includes the suggested edits made by the board.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
It passes 4-0. Please show that Commissioner Farr was excused. Okay, thank you very much. Next is item 11, which is Commissioner's business. We'll start off with announcements. We have announcements this morning. Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yesterday, I just wanted to note that I spent 2 hours, hour and a half in my role as chair of the Area Commission on Transportation, and also a half hour in my role as co-chair of Associated Oregon Counties Transportation Committee with the firm that will be conducting the audit on the Oregon Department of Transportation. And so it's based on the back and forth. I expect to be very comprehensive. It's going to focus on the service delivery piece, but also on the management piece, and not just the upper management in Salem, but the overall management, and that would include the region managers all the way down to the area managers in their performance. So don't know the timing, how long this will take. I'm suggesting it's going to take probably a while. But I was very impressed with the firm and that will be conducting this. They did their homework ahead of time, which I do appreciate, and they spent quite a bit of time not only with myself, but the ACT chair from Central Oregon and also an ACT chair from Eastern Oregon. So there was a small group of us there meeting with them, and then I met with them by myself based on my role as AOC co-chair of transportation. So I think it's needed. I don't think there's been an audit like this conducted with ODOT for quite some time. And I just think it's needed just to make sure performance is there. And but I was glad to be a part of it and to represent our area as well. That's it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Others? The only announcement that I have is this Friday at 11:30, Springfield will be dedicating a new Veterans Park, and it's my understanding that Commissioner Lycan will be present. I know that we've all been invited. I would like to attend the Cottage Grove Veterans Day ceremony, which happens to be at the exact same time. So anyway, there's lots of opportunities to go out and support our communities, and I appreciate the folks that are able to attend those events.
And unfortunately, I won't be able to attend because I have a meeting with the Driftwood Shores property owners at 10 o'clock in Florence.
Okay, that doesn't sound too good.
Drainage issues.
I'll enjoy mine better just saying that.
All right. Any other announcements? Okay, then we'll move to agenda team requests or work sessions. Any from the board today? Okay. Mr. Mokrzycki, how about reviewing the assignments? Do we have any?
No, I don't have any, other than making sure, on the, well, you scheduled the second reading for the emergency powers discussion, and making sure that is put on the list to have annual review and come back to the board for updates.
Perfect. Okay, we do, it's my understanding we don't have an executive session. Other business, I would just announce that next week is the AOC conference, but we have scheduled our November 14th evening joint meeting with the City of Eugene in regards to our city-county partnership work. So we do have a meeting here Monday evening in Harris Hall, I believe. So other than that, we're down until the last week in November, first day or two of December. So if there's no further business, we're adjourned.
All right.